think the Latino community is the one that uses most WhatsApp.
So that's very interesting because that was a concept I'd never heard of until talking to them. He said it's huge in Brazil, South America, and big in Europe.
Huge in Europe too.
So it was like, we should be taking advantage of that, but we're not.
Yeah.
And then they designed this AI program to where if you ask a question, say, to a hotel, their main clients are hotels.
Yeah.
So they have it set up to where, say you want to know where's the hotel located, or you want to know what best restaurants around the hotel, or any of those type of questions. The AI can answer all those for you, and then they've got it designed now to go straight to booking at that hotel's website. So
Fascinating.
So that way you have less expense
Yeah.
because you're not doing the OTAs or whatever.
Exactly.
And you're able to communicate with your clients. And then now they've actually built a dashboard to where on a daily basis they can see what bookings they've received from the WhatsApp. And instead of like OTA, we get our report on like the 18th of the month, because we're spending money promoting our destinations hotels on Vrbo, Expedia, and hotels.com.
Sure.
But like he was saying, they can give you the report. You can check it anytime. The hotels can just log in and go, okay, I'm doing really good, or I need to change the rate.
Oh, that's great.
And we were talking, we're not doing that here, but we should be.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that intrigued me looking into that concept with them. And then we did talk about ambush marketing.
Oh, yeah.
So he was kind of like, what am I talking about? So we talked a little bit about that and utilizing it to your benefits and things like that when you have the big city next to you.
Yeah.
And then we got into this really cool destination branding of this premier culinary destination in Brazil.
Yeah, he has worked at, I think, in Minas Gerais state, which is the most famous for the food in Brazil.
In which city?
Oh, it's actually a state, Minas Gerais. It's in the middle of the country and has the best food that you can.
I wonder if there's a city, he said, it's like 5,000 people.
Probably is Ouro Preto, or the black goat. That's the
sounds
translation.
familiar from the translation.
Or Diamantina, I don't remember. It's one of these two cities that he has worked with before. And
because they did workshops or focus groups.
Exactly.
But with only 5,000 people, wouldn't take a whole lot of workshops.
I don't know how many it took, but he shared that in my classroom, and they come up with a new logo.
Was it a circle?
Yes. And
because he had the culinary part, he had the heritage part, the green part, and then the train history.
Exactly. And that was super, super beneficial to the tourism community there. So
do you want us to at least start with, so you have it to move it around with who?
Yeah, you can just introduce yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we're not going to run this as a typical podcast. This is like when we just sit here and talk all day. Okay, so I don't open and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say it's a great pleasure for me to have Dr. Felipe Tobar.
Yeah, you're right.
And so this is my first time actually meeting you live. You've been my professor for a couple months now, and you're a fairly new PhD. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, pleasure to be here, James. And it's always better when we have students leading the shows, but you're a different type of student. You're more advanced in the industry than the others, and it's great to see that you're innovating things in tourism. So I came from Brazil in 2018. The first time I stepped into U.S. soil was to start my PhD at Clemson University. Fun fact, I only applied to Clemson. I didn't know that.
Me too.
Yeah? Oh, perfect. I didn't know that there was a thing to apply for different universities. Right. And so I was approved by Professor Dr. Gregory Ramshaw, who is your advisor now.
My advisor too.
So that another thing in common. And the idea was to explore the world of sport heritage, stadium tours, museums involved with soccer. But bringing tourism into the equation, and then finding a good recipe to develop a dissertation. Things went really well at Clemson University. Spent 5 years and a half in my PhD. Initially, the idea was to do a dissertation doing ethnographic study with fans in Manchester. I would follow how local fans kind of understand their matchday experience because of the presence of tourists in the stands of Old Trafford in Manchester. And because of COVID, I had to change the direction of the study. And then I started doing investigations on difficult heritage and football or soccer. And now I've almost there, presenting my dissertation, my documentary as a result of the dissertation. And it's gonna be featured in October the 30th at Clemson University. And you saw the documentary.
I was thinking we've already got a sneak peek of it.
You got it just for students as part of a class assignment, but now I'm going to open to the community.
So it's really great. I mean, you've just watching that as a class assignment has brought so many ideas to what we're going to do here.
Yeah, we can talk about that later because I thought it was great. And so kind of at Clemson University, those 5 years and a half, even I almost left Clemson just after the fourth year because I got a position at Leeds Beckett University in England. I went there 7 days. I didn't like the area. And then I said, let's go back to Clemson. Let's extend 1 year of PhD and try the US market, right? And then when I was finishing my PhD, Clemson opened the position for tourism events, assistant professor. I applied. I think there was more than 80 candidates in the pool. I was listed as the best 3, and then eventually I got the position. And I just continued my career at Clemson as my second year assistant professor in tourism events. But of course, my focus is in sport tourism, particularly in soccer tourism. And previously, by coming to the US, I was a soccer lawyer. I worked with
JD
professional
Park from
club.
Brazil.
Yeah. So I was a soccer lawyer there for about 9 years. I worked in first division up to the 4th division. I saw everything can happen inside the club, how a good and bad management affects the future of the club. But I got sick of corruption within the club, and as a lawyer, you need to clean, right, the mess of the owners. I said that was not for me. And then I entered academia. So I did my master's in cultural heritage and society, where I analyzed football as part of the Brazilian cultural heritage. And in that study, particularly, I investigated why football was not considered cultural heritage in Brazil, despite this popular appeal. And I found out there was because of corruption as well.
Oh, wow.
So the Brazilian Football Federation has been paid more than 40 politicians in the National Congress not to allow any sort of acknowledgement of that nature to happen. Otherwise, once football or the national team, for instance, are considered part of the Brazilian cultural heritage, then by law, the public office can investigate any of the institutions that are kind of in chief position commanding that cultural heritage. That would be the case for the Brazilian National Confederation, which in the past 15 years had forced to step down 3 presidents because of corruption, bribery cases. So I decided, okay, I want to go overseas. That was always my dream. I thought that everything I had to do in Brazil, I did at that time. Masters opened the opportunity to me to travel abroad. So I traveled to conference in Hungary, France, Colombia, to start traveling Europe particularly, and in connection with other researchers, other scholars. I kind of thought that's for me. I think academia will have freedom. I will be able to study soccer, be involved with soccer, and also travel.
Yeah.
So I didn't know at that time that I would be a tourism scholar. I have no clue in 2016 during my master's, but now I think everything makes sense, and now it's starting the second year.
So one thing interesting is you said you chose Clemson one school. Like me, I have to do it online, so I had two options. I had Clemson, or I had Iowa State for hotel PhD, hospitality PhD. So what made you hone in on Clemson when you had, because you went live and you could go anywhere. So what was the drawing to Clemson?
A very simple to answer was because of Ramshaw.
Okay.
Yes, in my master's, I was citing him
Yeah.
all the time. For those that are not aware, he's one of the leaders in sport heritage. He even has a book that he wrote when I just I think I was finishing my second year.
Okay.
So I remember that book took a lot of his time in time of mentoring, but I was a need for him and help him get the professorship. So I wanted to learn from one of the best.
Right.
And I remember I exchanged emails with him around 6 to 9 months. It was not the usual type of exchange that he later shared with me, because I was throwing ideas, he was replying, and I was like counter replying him, saying that you're wrong here, but you're right there. And I think that also caught his attention, that I was not just another student trying to get a position and then maybe leave him and find another advisor, which is quite common. So I was targeted in my intention of working with him, and to the point that if he left Clemson in the middle of my PhD, I probably would follow him and leave Clemson. So
good thing he's not going anywhere.
No, he's not. He almost had a chance to leave, but he stayed, luckily, and probably otherwise I wouldn't be at Clemson. So.
Well, the funny thing is, even though that was the only school I applied, I wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Ramshaw, because they found him and said, you got to read this dissertation topic. And so he chose me to come. So I wouldn't be there either.
Yeah, it's fun, right? How things works, but and that probably happens to you in a different era of your life. We are here to help people.
Yeah.
And he's a person that connects you and me. It's in some sense, and he's a great mentor. He's I think absolutely one of the best mentors and scholars I've ever met.
See, I wish I was there live to be able to talk to him more, though. Hopefully I'm going to come up to campus in a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, maybe me and Ramshaw can come. I and Ramshaw can come here to Atlanta, spend a couple.
Actually, I tried to get him. What did we want? We wanted to do the 50th podcast. It was in the 1st of August.
Yeah, in the summer.
And so I was going to try to bring
you should.
And then I was going to bring Dr. Muzo from UMass.
Okay.
And I think that was the two, and then somebody local.
Fantastic,
and do just actual almost like a dinner bourbon type talk.
Okay.
So, but Greg couldn't come. Muzo was in Turkey, and it just now we're looking at maybe down the road at the 75th or 100th or whatever. Now we got to bring you and Greg and Muzo and.
Oh yeah, Ramshaw is an NFL guy as well. He likes to enjoy some game days. He introduced me actually to to this board back in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he did talk to me about coming down and where to stay and going to a game.
Yep. Here you go.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So you went and did your dissertation on, I'm assuming, with Real Madrid and in Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in Portugal as well. But I couldn't include in the documentary the case of Sporting Lisbon, which was attached with Salazar. Mm-hmm. Salazar, for those that are not aware, was the longest dictator in Europe in the 20th century. People normally think about Mussolini, about Hitler, or about Franco, but Salazar was the longest dictatorship in Europe.
And he was a dictator where?
In Portugal. In Portugal.
Okay. I
From
thought I knew a lot of them.
1932 to 1974, something like that. The last 5 years of his life, he had a stroke, so he was not ruling, but there was his regime. But the club that I investigated was very, very penetrated in the high society of Portugal. So lots of generals, lots of politicians from his regime were presidents or vice presidents, directors of that club. And the club intentionally, many instances, supported the regime. Not just in Portugal, but overseas when they colonized Africa, or to maintain the power. So they use the club and football. But I had a request from those that I have interviewed that work inside the museum not to use the interviews or the materials in my documentary. Of course, in the dissertation, you create nicknames. Everything is anonymous, but they were not comfortable yet, and I could say as a society, to deal with the difficult heritage of that particular authoritarian regime. Although they expressed that should happen sooner or later.
So you have a future article.
Yeah, no, yes. But then I kind of, my documentary and my documentary would say focus only in São Paulo, from Germany. It's a club, now first division club. At the time that I did my investigations, there was second division, small club in Hamburg, one of the gateways to the world. Actually, a city that Hitler visited several times because the ships were many of them built there, and so it was a very important area for Germany during the war. So it was common to Hitler to visit the area. And the other club was Real Madrid, and this one everyone probably knows about it. And
I was surprised at all that history that you brought to life.
Yeah.
Because during my master's, we did global hospitality, so we went to Madrid, and we went to Real Madrid Stadium and the museum, and it was so interesting watching your video documentary because it was nothing that we saw in the museum.
Yeah, sports museums are normally planned as celebratory spaces in which you're going to see the golden moments of the organization, former players, right? Hall of Fame kind of thing. And everything that is political, they try to avoid engaging, not to fragment the fan base.
Yeah.
Which is a political act, right? Being neutral is a choice. It's a fair choice, I would say, in democracy. And at the end of my dissertation, more than 500 pages, I came to this conclusion that I cannot criticize them for choosing silence, because we are in a democracy. They have this option. We should respect it. Although I also say that there's so many positive outcomes that they're not allowing to happen at the societal level, that then I kind of feel sorry for them, right? They're not using at the fullest potential what sports can bring to society, right? Like it's really a source of healing for negative experience of the past. Because at the very end, particularly in the Spanish Civil War, I would say that's the most conflictive society in my documentary. You had in both sides supporters of Real Madrid, both in the nationalists or rebels and those that were in the Republican side. So you have representation of the club in both sides. And not talking about what happened to the people that live in that period, it's for me a wasting opportunity to come into terms with the past. And what my dissertation shows and other studies, particularly in Germany, that deal with difficult paths does not hurt your brand, will not compromise your commercial interests in the global market. Instead, could bring some sort of transparency that is always needed for any brand, right? And plus, the time is a very important component that works in favor of those clubs. This has been like almost 8 years ago, right? It's almost a century ago. And everything that is distance from nowadays is easier to talk.
Right.
Rather than current social issues. You don't see still many organizations here in America, but also particularly in Europe, talking about racism, talking about xenophobia, anti-Semitism, because they don't know how to talk about it right now. It's hard, it's challenging. Those that are talking are still trying to know how to communicate it to the sports fans, right, to their fan bases. But talking about the past, it's history. You can't deny history, as I prove, but eventually come to light.
Yeah.
And my documentary, in some way, brings that to light, and shows that it's better to talk using the sources that they already have than not to talk. Because when they do not talk and people start talking, then they're probably going to criticize them of their absence in not engaging with a very important part of the country's history that are still being discussed in different realms of society, not just in football.
So you brought a whole life to this, because I don't think over here in America we don't have a sport or clubs that have that kind of presence like they do in Europe.
Yeah, we don't, unfortunately. Now we're seeing a little bit in the West Coast, like there's Portland Timbers in the MLS. Also, you have, I think, LA Galaxy. There's another club in San Diego, which is very pro-LGBTQ community. But I don't see them addressing, for instance, we don't see in the southern part of the United States sports organizations trying to bring the Jim Crow era and how they operated in that time.
Right.
We see, of course, the Negro Leagues being acknowledged. The Negro League Baseball, I think, is in Kansas.
Yeah.
They are doing a lot of great work. They're even in video games now.
I didn't know that.
But
Larry Lester.
Yeah.
I had him over to Columbus, Mississippi a few times.
Yeah, I think he went to Clemson, to Ramshaw's class, I think, a week ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
And so we don't have this engagement with those difficult paths, right? And we can even use Clemson University as an example. The area of the football stadium was also an era of segregation from the 30s to the 70s. The hill that is highly famous, right? I think they use this jargon of the most exciting 25 seconds in college football. When they run down the hill, the players and Coach Dabo run down the hill before touching the rock. The opposite hill in the 40s up to the 70s, according to some historians now on campus, was former called Negro Hill. It was a place where the black community of Clemson was allowed to stay to watch the game, but it was even outside of the field perimeter.
Wow.
So these stories are not discussed by any person in Clemson, nor either from the athletics. And probably there are many other campuses around the southern part of the United States that have a difficult heritage to acknowledge, right? So we have been seeing a potential to discuss those things, particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. But I would say sports organizations went to a different direction to just be concerned with the present and with the future without necessarily acknowledging the past. And in my studies, I kind of understand that as just a different way of dealing with time. So in Germany, you have an understanding that you cannot prepare for the future or live the present without taking lessons from the past. So the past is really present.
Right.
And in the United States or in other societies, you just focus forward, right? So there's different time regimes operating in society, and yeah, again, if I have done that this exercise. I ask my students about. So I use the case of Henry Ford. Henry Ford, for those that are not aware, has always been an anti-Semitism person, but he's remembered as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America, right? He's very famous for Ford and
Right.
Ford cars, but he was the one that disseminated anti-Semitism in America using Ford. So every Ford dealership had pamphlets that criticized Jews in America in the
Wow.
10s and the 20s, to the point that black communities in Florida made a boycott. They were not buying Ford in Florida in the 20s. Hitler drank a lot from Henry Ford ideas, to the point that he translated these pamphlets in German language and spread that in Germany. Henry Ford portrait was in Hitler's office. People don't know much about it. And his son attended rallies in Nuremberg, and their consular exchange letters. Henry Ford was the only foreign person to receive the Iron Cross by Hitler
Wow.
in America. So he was a Nazi, we can say that. But the Detroit Lions or the Ford Field, or even the Ford company in their they have a tourist attraction in Detroit. They do not acknowledge this past. They do not acknowledge that Henry Ford was an anti-Semitist.
Well, I bet not.
Why, right? So when I ask my students, would you want the Detroit Lions or Ford Field to acknowledge it, at least acknowledge it? They said, it doesn't matter. I was not born. So that's this idea of just looking forward, right? Not trying to learn with past events and what they can teach us on how to get better in the present and in the future eventually. So it is different way of operating and living in society. That's probably one of the main takeaways from my dissertation, which is not just commercial and touristic kind of interests or political in that sense, but there are time regimes and kind of hidden structures that we don't sometimes not even conceive, defining how we deal with those problems.
So that kind of explains when you started class, you mentioned all the kind of historical aspects of Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Yeah.
well, that's kind of neat to hear, but I thought it was interesting or actually kind of strange.
Yeah.
But now explains why you actually brought all that up in class.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Clemson was a Cherokee land taken by force. I know that we cannot do anything about it, right?
Right.
Anything, but learning where you are, how that happened, I think is important to understand how a university got into the position that they are now.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting when you brought that up.
I don't think people normally try to avoid those topics because they deem that sensitive. But it's in the past. You cannot change the past.
Right.
So for me, it's easy to talk about the past. It's sometimes harder to talk about things that are happening now.
True.
But that shouldn't harm people or harm their feelings. But we do know that harms. We do know.
Right.
I have done a study. So Real Madrid and Barcelona last year, they got in an argument. Who was the club of the regime? But club of Franco, right? And Franco, dictator, highly divisive figure in Spain. So no one wants to be attached to this figure, right? So we analyzed over 4,000 comments on YouTube on the videos that Real Madrid uploaded and the press conference of FC Barcelona president. And we found out that both sides denies any sort of relationship with the regime. So there is no effects on loyalty, or they are not also considering not buying things from the club, because there's something inside us that's kind of a bias component that is generated probably by the high levels of allegiance that we have for those clubs that blocks any acknowledgement or consideration that what could happen with our clubs in the past.
I guess that's like you said. It's history.
It's history, yeah.
They weren't alive then. It's not happening now.
Yeah, but history as heritage is a choice. You decide what you're gonna tell.
Right.
Right, and and what you're gonna tell also implies what you're gonna not tell. And those things are important to understand, and we normally goes and don't pay attention to it.
So real quickly, tell our listeners the difference between history and heritage.
Okay, so history is what have been said to happen in the past, right? Like it's what you probably learn in high school.
Right.
It's what has been written in books by those in power, right? Ultimately, I would say history is what really happened, but sometimes we don't know for many reasons what really happened.
Right.
Heritage is the use of these pasts in the present. It is the study of how we communicate history in museums, in memorials, in all sorts of historical sites. So it's always use history as the substance of analysis. History and heritage goes hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. But I had to learn the difference with Ramshaw very quickly.
Yeah.
Because I'm a closet historian, and Ramshaw is definitely not.
He's not. Yeah. Although he needs to consult historical sources, otherwise you cannot do the research. So in Real Madrid case, for instance, the official history of the club was that they never had a president during the Spanish Civil War. That is in the books. But then other books and other sources says that they did have. And then I try, okay, why they're not telling that?
Mm-hmm.
So why in their heritage work they're not acknowledging the other side of the history? So it's an example of how heritage scholars kind of needs to deal with historical sources.
So we're going through the issue here with Stone Mountain Park
Mm-hmm.
and the carving.
Okay.
Do you familiar with Stone Mountain Park and the carving?
No.
Oh, wow. Stone Mountain Park was created as a memorial to Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson.
Okay. Confederates.
Right here. It's the largest relief carving, I believe, in the world.
Oh, okay.
It was started by Bergeland, who did Mount Rushmore.
Uh-huh.
And it's a giant carving on the side of one of the biggest rock formations.
Yeah.
A lot of this stone is actually in the White House and in I think the Japan.
Wow.
Not sure the hotel or which, but there was a major.
Interesting.
So it's all over the world was
Uh-huh.
stone from Stone Mountain prior to went back when it was alive,
Mhm.
allowed to be taken out. But now it's a big controversy because it's a monument to the Confederacy.
Yeah, yeah. And that's very interesting because last weekend I was at NASCAR in Charlotte, so I went to the Xfinity type of course. I think they have 3 divisions,
Mm-hmm.
so it was not the main race that happened on Sunday. But we were, myself and a group of scholars from NC State, from Duke, USC, and Clemson. We went there to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from the NASCAR. And one of their policies in 2021 was to ban any Confederate flags from the tracks. And I see that is also a symbolism of what the Confederation represented, right?
Right.
But then we deal always with family heritage in this particular example, right? That normally those people will not want to agree that their ancestors were some sort of racist, right? Probably there are people in the Confederate army that were not at all, but had to fight, right? There is a very interesting data in Germany that around 85 to 90% of the population nowadays still refuse to believe that their grandpas were Nazis.
You could see that.
Yeah.
Because you also think about it, was everyone a Nazi, or did they have to be in the army? Because
exactly,
you had to.
Yeah. One thing is you get enlisted, right? Another thing is how you really thought, what were your values. That's why it's so difficult to come into terms with the past and to create policies nowadays that will make both sides happy. It's actually impossible, I'd say. But you need to take a stance or be neutral. But being neutral just delays the problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Question: when you were in Charlotte, you really were in Cabarrus County.
Yeah, where is where
the Charlotte Motor Speedway is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so my dissertation is going to potentially look at the fact that Cabarrus County is a large suburb in Charlotte.
Okay.
But it's a separate city, separate county. It's got 4 or 5 cities. And where you were was probably Kannapolis, and there's a Great Wolf Lodge there. But the Charlotte Motor Speedway isn't in Charlotte.
And carries the name, right? And I told you I was in Charlotte. I was not in Charlotte.
And see, that's the same thing we deal with here with DeKalb. A lot of Atlanta's in DeKalb.
Yes.
But, we have 11 different cities. We have DeKalb County name. But Atlanta's the dominant name out there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And that creates challenges for you, right? To promote your place.
Well, when I was outside Chicago, we were Lake County, Indiana. We changed to Indiana, Chicago. Now it's South Shore.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't know where any of those are.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably only the locals know that.
Yeah.
But so it's probably maybe a matter of kind of working towards the people that normally come to that place, that destination, to change their perceptions. It's all about perception, right? At the end.
Yeah. Well, I came to visit what turned out to be DeKalb County in my jurisdiction before, with my father-in-law getting elevated as a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed at the Marriott Century Center, where you'll be later tonight.
Okay.
And no clue that I was in Chamblee or DeKalb.
Okay.
I just thought I was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I drive by, I go, wait a minute, that's our hotel now?
Is there any sort of recommendation to hotels that are in DeKalb here to emphasize the visitors are in DeKalb area, not in Atlanta?
No, because actually they emphasize the fact they are in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
Because we had a city that just became a city, and a couple of the hotels' name changed as a freak just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost a ton of business when their name changed to the city of Brookhaven versus the city of Atlanta.
I see. Yeah, I can see
So it's
that.
an issue where you want to be Atlanta address.
Yeah.
Even if you're not.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I wonder in when they welcome the guests, not maybe in the promotional side of it.
Right, just welcome.
That maybe would be something to consider, right?
Because we check in tonight, see what they say.
Yeah, I will.
Because that hotel is in DeKalb. It's in the city of Chamblee.
Chamblee.
So it'd be interesting to say.
Yeah.
Because I think the address is Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Hotel is in city of Chamblee.
Okay.
In DeKalb County.
I'm really looking forward to your dissertation to see
Yeah.
how you're gonna address this problem.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, right now I'm working on almost like a dissertation for sports tourism, working on a mixed method for sports tourism, which is why you're here
Yeah.
to be on our panel tomorrow.
Sure.
For sports tourism. We actually have 3 people from the Chilean delegation
Amazing.
will be here tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
They just sent their names in today, so that's going to be very cool. They requested to be able to come.
Very interesting.
And then I was teaching at Georgia State University in the hospitality program. Dr. Kim, which you'll meet tonight, he's coming. He's having his master's level class attend because they have to deal with me in May.
Oh, okay.
And then we're promoting it to the Georgia State Hospitality undergrad.
Yeah.
Then I've reached out to the director of Kennesaw State University, Dr. Jackson. He's promoting to bring Kennesaw State Hospitality students over.
Okay.
And now we've got a lot of different game developers looking to come because we have Don Carter, who actually is running an event the weekend after this called ShowCon, which is a esports gaming con type event.
Yeah.
So he's going to talk about esports and gaming. So it's going to be a really fun time to talk about all the aspects of sports tourism. And the one thing you're going to bring up, you actually let me know that the Club Cup just got announced, and I haven't found anybody that knows that yet. So you're way ahead of the game. Club Cup just was announced for next year, June, July.
And the East Coast.
And the East Coast.
And the West Coast is going to be the Gold Cup, CONCACAF, the Nations tournament. Yes, Atlanta and Charlotte are going to be host cities. So in Atlanta, you're going to have the best teams in the world. Teams like Real Madrid, Manchester City, representatives from South America like River Plate from Buenos Aires, Palmeiras from São Paulo, Flamengo from Rio de Janeiro, and then teams from Australia, Japan. So 25 clubs, the best of the best, performing in the United States for the first time of the tournament. So that's the very first time of this format that FIFA created, particularly to, of course, maximize their profits, but also intentionally designed to be hosted in the U.S. because it's here where the money is right now, to the point that many Premier League teams already realize that they need the American market to stay in business. So the presence of those soccer clubs in the U.S. are just going to continue growing. And that brings a very niche opportunity for destinations like DeKalb and others to attract those international and domestic tourists when these teams are playing at their stadiums. So if we use the example of the Premier League, right, or La Liga, when we talk about Real Madrid in Barcelona, they already notice that 25-30% of the stadium is made by tourists, up to 40% depending on the club. And the more tourists you receive, the more global you are. And then one of the important consequences of that's it's not a consequence, it's just like a side effect, is that you are able to get more broadcasting deals across the world. So the more, and that goes also through different factors. So Bram Shaw, myself, and another scholar from James Madison University, Jonathan Oliveira, we developed a concept, the Global Touristic Football Clubs. And this concept has 6 factors. First, you need to win international titles, like Champions League. So the Champions League is a competition that gathers the best clubs in Europe, and in audience is second to the NFL, to the Super Bowl, right? In clubs, not in nations. Nations then would be the World Cup and the Olympics, right? But the Champions League is global globally famous. So if you win that tournament, your fan base just spread out. And that was the case of Manchester City, for instance, when they won in 2023. They literally start opening offices in several places in the world. They have an office here, they have an office in Shanghai, another in Singapore, and so on and so forth. The second factor that we kind of came up was the presence of international players, right? Players like Messi. Inter Miami just become a global tourist attraction when they sign Messi. Every people goes to the game now to see Messi, to the point that when Messi leaves the field because of an injury or a sub,
They leave.
they leave. There was 80,000 people here in Atlanta when they play Atlanta FC, Atlanta United, Inter Miami versus Atlanta United. I went to that match. Like a couple hours before the match, they announced that Messi wouldn't come because he didn't want to play on turf, artificial turf. So there was like full packed stadium, and most of the people were just wearing Argentinian jerseys or Messi jerseys from previous clubs like Barcelona, PSG, or Inter Miami. So having those type of players helps your club to be global. Like if you have Cristiano Ronaldo, for instance, Real Madrid had for several years. Ronaldo is more following Instagram than the club itself.
Well, I guess it's that way over here with NFL players or with NBA players.
Yeah, but just to give a context for the audience, the power of soccer, right? Real Madrid has more followers than all NFL teams combined on Instagram.
Wow.
So
It's almost like it's well, I guess over here we think baseball, but we have baseball, we have football,
Yeah.
but soccer or football over here hasn't still doing great, but it hasn't become like
no, it's not a global sport for several reasons, right? Rules are difficult. You normally just it didn't spread as soccer since the beginning of the last century. But as I said, having those particular type of players that we call celebrity players literally helps you having tourists in your stands. And then we go I think the third one's like having broadcasting deals in different parts of the world, having a very global social media fan base, not just on Instagram but Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms. Like in China they have Weibo, I guess. And so if you have a presence in those social medias where fans are normally talking about the clubs, is really, really important.
So how do we get the fans from Real Madrid to want to come to DeKalb?
Well, if your destination, DeKalb, is gonna host the facility of Real Madrid,
We're hoping. Yeah, thanks to you, we're trying to talk to them.
Yeah, that would be amazing. They would like to be close to the club. They like to go to the training sessions if it's available to go. So the itinerary of sport tourism that's quite interesting goes around where the clubs are. So if they're in Atlanta, they're gonna do things around Atlanta. If they gonna play in Florida, they're gonna go to Florida. Maybe a day before or a day after, they're gonna do things in Florida, and then come back to Atlanta where the base of the club is. And that's not just in soccer. That's in cricket. We see that in rugby. That's kind of the nature of sport tourists. Traveling with the club or the nation, if it's a World Cup. So if you want to have tourists exploring your destination during the time of the Club World Cup, I would say you should come up with authentic things from DeKalb, which will get the attention from those international tourists that are, of course, seeking to have an authentic experience while in the United States. You have this opportunity next year, 2026, with the World Cup.
Right.
And I don't know how it's going to work for the Olympics, because in France, although it was in Paris, they have programs for different cities. Lyon had a program, Marseille had a program, Bordeaux had a program. They tried to make the games like national in scale,
Mm-hmm.
although it was in Paris that was happening. I don't know how that will happen in the US. still no information.
Right.
But potentially by being a former Olympic city, I think something will happen. And then you probably target more the domestic
Right.
type of tourists.
Well, I don't know if you heard, but it's not international, but we just were awarded the Super Bowl.
Yes,
28 will be our
yeah.
second, third, fourth Super Bowl.
Plus you have always college football, exciting college football games.
Right, definitely.
Right. You have Clemson and Georgia. Right? Clemson, Georgia was here a couple months
talk
ago.
about that game.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. If you're a Georgia fan, you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Us being Clemson, you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, but so there, I remember when I host Heath Diller, he's now the CEO of Visit Greenville. He was a researcher at Charlotte, the DMO of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about the Mayo Classic in 2021. It was Clemson, Georgia as well, at the Bank of America Stadium. They had 80,000 people going to the game, but around 200,000 people coming to town because of the game. And because it was a Saturday noontime, they had people traveling on Friday. So they stay in hotels on Friday, and then because of the game, because of, alcohol consumption, they also decided, most of them decided to stay on Saturday, leaving on Sunday. And through all sorts of ways of understanding where they come from, including satellites, visualization, or they had a software where they could track your regional code. So if it's 864, you come from South Carolina. I don't know in Georgia, but they knew everyone where they come from and how long they stay, and was pretty much around the area, with a few folks from New York, Tennessee, probably alumni folks that were traveling to the stadium. So even college football games can be a powerful source for destinations.
Well, we're lucky enough that in DeKalb, at your hotel you're going to be at, we usually host Clemson. We usually host most of GSU competing teams. Most of the Georgia Tech teams stay within our area. So
yeah, I think it's then a matter of, okay, if the game is going to be on Saturday and you have Friday, where certainly the players are going to sleep here, can you do something with one or two players that are not going to play at all?
Yeah.
But you can bring them to the dinner with fans, promoted by DeKalb. Then everyone's going to stay here instead of staying downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking advantage of the opportunity and being creative. But of course, there's always restrictions on the football side, right?
Right.
But it's always, I think, a matter of negotiation at the end. What you can
I know
provide.
they didn't this year, but when Clemson comes, they usually rent out a big movie theater in '85 off Chambly Tucker Road, and this year they couldn't. They didn't have the time. He wanted the kids in, I think, bed before that. But normally they buy a whole block of couple theaters for Clemson football.
So they go and watch
whatever the movie's going on at the time.
Look at that, yeah. So I think fans would love to have any sort of interaction with these players. So I think it's the future of sport tourism in the U.S. is exciting, particularly because you have the infrastructure to run those events. You're not spending in building new arenas. You are not potentially creating negative effects besides environmental aspects like trash, which is totally expected to happen, right?
Right.
But then of course need to acknowledge how sustainable those tournaments would be in terms of carbon emissions, fossil fuel emissions, and if you're going to have offset programs in place. Although some sport like FIFA and other organizations are talking about it,
right.
The simple fact that they are extending their calendars to have the Club World Cup with 25 teams, it shows that there will be more carbon emissions because there will be more teams traveling, more fans traveling. And just to give you a comparison, until 2000, I think no, 2000. 2000. For about like from the 60s to the 2000s, the FIFA World Cup they're gonna have next year were just a matter of one European team and one South American team, just 2 games. From 2000 to this year, they had 12 teams from different parts of the world representing different continents. Now it's 25.
Wow.
And the World Cup nations is going to be 60. And 48. You used to have 32. So all sorts of sustainability narratives are just going in the opposite direction of their actions.
Well, it's like the Olympics jumped heavily into get the bid of the Olympics. It was had to be sustainable and buildings that would be useful afterwards. But that's a futuristic part of the plan.
And players complain about that. Like the beds were sustainable, the materials, but they were not comfortable. And players need to rest to perform at the highest level. They train for 4 years. You cannot just throw sustainability concerns and not care about the players.
Right.
Also, the food in the courts of the Olympic Village, athletes criticize it because there's not enough protein, and players need energy.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of how you introduce those new changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've been on an hour.
Well, that was fast.
Yeah, I mean, because we could dive into so many different topics.
Well, we can go more on that tomorrow for sure. Of course, we're going to talk about the development of sport tourism, internationally and domestically, right?
Yes.
So
What's going to be interesting is we could potentially have a person who actually ran a World Cup in another country.
yeah,
So she might be here tonight for the dinner.
okay,
So
that would be amazing. Yeah, I have seen the positives and the negatives of the World Cup in Brazil when we host 2014, and since I'm a avid soccer fan, now with the opportunity to understand through literature, right, the things that they don't show us on TV. The World Cup can be a very, very positive event or a very tragic event.
hopefully the Atlanta 26 will be very positive.
I think so. I think it's going to be, as I said, because of the infrastructure that exists.
Atlanta knows how to host those big events. We've learned over the years with so many of these.
And I will tell you one thing. Even the biggest clubs in Europe, Real Madrid, Chelsea, they are eager to learn the American way of running sports.
Interesting.
Entertainment.
Entertainment.
Yeah. They're coming here. They're learning. There's a lot of two-way conversations between those organizations, among those organizations to make their products more attractive.
Well, I got to ask Dr. Brookover, when I had a class, it's been a while ago, got me into Ted Lasso.
Oh yeah,
you watched Ted Lasso?
He mentioned that to me. I've seen some footage of Ted Lasso. I just think everything he says I know.
We had to watch it for class, PhD class. I'm watching Ted Lasso.
Oh really? Interesting. It never caught my attention too much, but there's a sense of humor that I value there. But it talks also about community, right? About
well, I think he was getting into the community side.
Yeah.
Everybody was more equal, remembering everybody's name, being respectful to everybody.
I think it's good for those that are trying to know more about soccer in a fun way.
Yeah.
Because he clearly doesn't know anything, and he start calling coaches, right? And to understand the rules and some type of behaviors that are accepted or not. I think for those that are trying to understand more about soccer, could be a very, very good introduction.
I just thought that was interesting. We were watching that. And now to get ready for season 3. So we just were communicating back and forth on LinkedIn about actually Ted Lasso and if I come up in a couple weeks.
One series that if I can recommend on soccer, is the Wrexham series, the Wrexham FC. Uh, the owner is a very famous person in the United States. I forgot his name now. He's a Hollywood actor. If you Google Wrexham.
So is it a
Uh,
TV show or is it like a
Yeah,
documentary?
here you have it. You see that guy on the left? He was, what's his name? Ryan Reynolds. So he's a Hollywood actor. They bought the club during the COVID time for a penny, £2 million.
Oh, wow.
And they, in the, I think the sixth division. So England has 7 divisions, professional divisions. No, 6 professional divisions. The 7 is a regional already. They bought the club for £2 million, and now they're in the 3rd division after I think 4 years, doing amazingly. They have sponsors like Expedia, Delta, not Delta. I think it was it's the other company that rivals Delta, not Americans.
American
United, because it's Wrexham United. So
Oh, yeah.
they also his partner Rob, he's from Philly. He owns title of whiskey company, also sponsors the club, and they come up with this series, the backstage of the club, how they really transform and most importantly how they gave voice to the locals. So they really went there and say, we're not changing the culture. We're trying to learn with you guys what is to be a Wrexham fan. And they made much more money with this show than they could ever imagine. And now they're being able to hire better players and keep moving, maybe up to the Premier League, which is the goal of this project by the end of this decade, to be in the Premier League. And being in the Premier League, then we're talking about millions and millions of pounds or dollars. And potentially we will see Wrexham being sponsored by some DMOs, as has been the case, and it's the case of several Premier League clubs. And then maybe to finish, the city of Detroit is now on the jersey of Berlin FC, which plays the 2nd division. We had the case of Fulham. It's a Premier League team in London that had the sponsorship of Visit Florida.
Wow.
You had Norwich, a team in the Premier League, now in the 2nd division, that had the sponsorship of Visit Tampa Bay. You have Visit Kissimmee sponsoring West Ham. You have all sorts of examples in the US.
All right, Monica, who are we going to sponsor?
Here you go. You have that, and they realize, because the Premier League is watched or broadcasted to 3.5 billion people in the world. Your potential market is huge.
Yeah.
They are their return of investment is incredibly justified.
But your sponsorship money is really huge too.
So if you sponsor like a team that just got into the Premier League, that are going to play against Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, games that everyone's going to watch, your brand will be there appearing. And maybe you consider traveling to that city when you are here, right, in the West. So this is another strategy that involves sport tourism that has been prevalent in the past decade in the United States and is getting more and more common, particularly because the ownership model of the Premier League has changed. And now around 70% of the owners of Premier League teams are from America. So,
well, we're one of the big sponsors of the Atlanta Hustle, which is a professional ultimate frisbee league.
mm-hmm.
And then we're a sponsor of the Tucker Youth Soccer Association, which actually goes by TISA, and they have major soccer events
And I
coming
think
in.
you're right. The youth sports tourism industry is the largest sport tourism industry in the U.S.
You got to figure, regardless, it's almost recession-proof. Because
Yeah.
you're not going to tell little Johnny he can't go to a tournament, or little
Exactly.
Monica she can't go
Yeah.
to a tournament.
Yeah. You're right. I think it's 19% 1.3 billion value. That's the number for youth sport tourism in America. It's bigger than the major leagues combined, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, it's
fascinating.
a tremendous market for us.
Yeah, there are places in Texas with 60 soccer fields. Imagine just to host youth tournaments.
Wow.
Yeah, as you said, pandemic proven. Nothing to stop those parents to travel with their kids
Yeah.
and stay in hotels, going to restaurants, filling up gas tanks.
Well, the other thing that people about sports tourism is they see. I mean, you're seeing people coming into your restaurants or shopping with uniforms.
Yeah.
Or like rock climbing would have the little numbers on their backs. So tennis, you're seeing people in jerseys, T-shirts, uniforms, whatever.
Yeah.
So you know when they're there and you know when they're spending money. So that's always good.
It's always good, and the return of investment, even of small scale events, are huge. Like, get from visits Spartanburg. Some numbers in class was astonishing for students. Like a 4-day track event, starting Thursday, finishing on Sunday, kind of generated almost $2 million in return of investment.
Wow.
And probably
track brings a lot of people.
And they pay, I think, a fee of 150,000 for the organization to bring the event to the destination. And of course, then you force in the negotiations the tournaments to start Thursday, so they can have more nights.
Right.
And more times going to restaurants. So that's another interesting area for destinations, small destinations to go into.
Yeah.
Because once you do a very good event, the organizations want to come back.
Yeah.
That we're seeing with Greenville. Just announced the women's, I think, Southern Conference. They're coming back to Greenville for the fourth year in a row, because of the hospitality that Greenville has been able
Greenville
to.
is really taken off.
Yeah.
I mean, from the marketing side, the sports side, the rumor is the Hyatt downtown is what started kicking things off.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And sport tourism, travelers in general are good spenders.
Yeah.
Because you're already there. You travel a lot of miles to be there. Why are you going to save money?
Right.
Right?
And you got to eat out all your meals.
You need to.
And you're going to go shopping, gifts, and you're not on the field the whole time.
You're not. Yeah. So I think the parents and the relatives, they are the ones that ended up spending more than the actual players. And yeah, as I said, staying in the destinations are part of negotiations with sports organizations, and that just leverages the outcomes, the positive economic outcomes for destinations.
Well, thank you for coming down, being on our podcast. We this is the thing is tomorrow, so the podcast, of course, obviously will be later.
Sure.
Airing, but we're excited you came down.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited for the event tomorrow.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.